Have you ever had a passion, a real honest-to-goodness passion? Something you pour your heart, your soul, and frankly a whole lot of your paycheck into, not because you have to, but because it brings you a kind of quiet joy that nothing else can. For me, that passion is baking, and this is the story of how that beautiful creative outlet got twisted into a weapon and how I was forced to use it to teach my entitled sister-in-law a lesson she would never ever forget. My name is Jackson Flores. By day, I'm a graphic designer. I'm 32 years old, and I spend most of my working hours staring at a screen, nudging pixels into perfect alignment, and living in a world of hex codes and vector paths. It's a good job, it's creative, it pays the bills, but it's clean, it's digital, it's intangible. You can't taste a logo. You can't smell a color palette. And at the end of a long week, my soul just craves something real. That's where the baking comes in. This whole journey started about 5 years ago when I was 27. I was looking for a hobby to de-stress from work, something that used my hands and engaged a different part of my brain. I started simple, like everyone does. A batch of cookies here, a boxed brownie mix there. But something just clicked. The precision of measuring flour, the science of how yeast makes dough rise, the artistry of piping buttercream. It was like graphic design, but you could eat the results. It was magic. And I didn't just dip my toes in. I plunged right in. My small apartment kitchen slowly transformed. The cheap hand mixer was replaced by a heavy-duty stand mixer that hummed like a high-performance engine. I started collecting specialty pans, offset spatulas, piping tips of every conceivable size and shape. I spent countless hours devouring online tutorials, reading books on pastry theory, and learning the delicate dance of tempering chocolate. My weekends were no longer for brunch and errands. They were for mastering French macarons, for perfecting a multi-layered opera cake, for laminating dough over and over to get those flaky, buttery layers in a croissant. This wasn't just a casual hobby, it was a serious craft that I dedicated myself to. It was my art form. My wife, who I married 2 years ago, was my biggest supporter. She was also my most willing taste tester, which she never complained about. She's an amazing woman, the kind of person who just radiates warmth and understanding. She saw the hours I put in, the focus on my face, as I smoothed the final layer of frosting on a cake. She understood that what I was doing in the kitchen wasn't just mixing sugar and eggs. It was a form of self-expression. And through my wife, I inherited a new family, her family. For the most part, they were great, welcoming kind, the whole package. And then there was Allison. Allison Jackson is my wife's younger sister. At the time this all kicked off, she was 28 years old, 2 years younger than my wife, and 4 years younger than me. To be fair, Allison isn't a monster. She's not evil. But she has a particular worldview that can be incredibly frustrating. She's one of those people who sees the world only through the lens of how it can benefit her. She's not great at recognizing the time, effort, or cost that goes into things that other people do. She just sees the end result and thinks, I want that. From the moment I entered the family, Allison was fascinated by my cakes. Whenever there was a birthday or a holiday, I'd bring one of my creations, a towering chocolate fudge cake for her dad's 60th. A delicate lemon and raspberry layer cake for a family Easter gathering. Everyone would rave about them, and I was always happy to share. It felt good to see people enjoy something I'd poured so much effort into. But Allison's compliments always had a different flavor to them. Instead of saying, "Wow, Jackson, you're so talented," she'd say something like, "Oh my God, you could totally sell these. This is like a $1,000 cake from a fancy bakery." At first, I took it as a compliment. But over time, I started to notice a pattern. She wasn't appreciating the craft. She was appraising the product. She saw my passion not as a skill I had lovingly developed over 5 long years, but as a free high-end service that she just happened to have access to through her sister. She'd make little comments that got under my skin. "It must be so easy for you to just whip these up," she'd say, completely oblivious to the 12 hours I might have spent over 3 days planning baking, chilling, and decorating. Or she'd ask, Can you make one of these for my friend's baby shower next week? Not as a question, but as a statement, as if my time and resources were just on standby for her social calendar. My wife saw it too. She'd gently try to run interference. Allison, you know Jackson works a full-time job. These cakes are a huge amount of work, one she'd explain. Allison would just wave her hand dismissively and say, "Oh, I know, but he's so good at it. It's probably second nature to him by now." She fundamentally did not understand, or perhaps refused to understand, that just because someone is good at something, it doesn't make it effortless. In fact, it's usually the opposite. The skill is a direct result of immense unseen effort. This dynamic, this subtle but persistent devaluing of my time and passion, just simmered in the background of our family relationship for a couple of years. It was annoying, but manageable. I learned to set boundaries, to politely decline her casual requests, and to just smile and nod when she made her clueless comments. Then about 6 months before everything went nuclear, Allison got engaged. The whole family was thrilled for her. Her fiancé seemed like a decent guy, and Allison was on cloud nine, immediately diving headfirst into the chaotic world of wedding planning. We were all swept up in the excitement. Venue tours, dress shopping debates over color schemes. It was the main topic of conversation at every family dinner. I was genuinely happy for her. A wedding is a beautiful thing, and I wished her nothing but the best. I even started thinking about what kind of amazing cake I might make for her bridal shower as a gift. Something special from the heart. A gesture of goodwill to my new sister-in-law. Looking back, I was so naive. I saw her wedding as a happy family occasion. She saw it as the perfect opportunity. She had access to a personal, highly skilled pastry chef who worked for free, and as the plans for her big day began to solidify, I could feel her gaze turning to me. I started to get this sinking feeling in my gut, a quiet dread that began to grow with every conversation about florists and photographers. She wasn't just looking for a brother-in-law to celebrate with her. She was looking at a vendor, and she had already decided on the price. The sinking feeling in my gut was a better predictor than any weather forecast. For weeks it had been a low-pressure system hanging over me, a sense of impending doom. The storm finally made landfall on a perfectly pleasant Sunday evening, exactly 3 months before the wedding. We were at my in-laws' house for dinner. The air was filled with the smell of roasted chicken and the comfortable chatter of family. My wife and I were sitting across from Allison and her fiancé, who were as usual holding court about the wedding plans. Allison was glowing, rattling off a list of her recent victories in the wedding planning wars. "I got the photographer to throw in an extra hour for free," she announced, beaming. "And the florist is giving us a 10% discount because I told them my cousin is a big-time wedding blogger," which she isn't, but they don't know that. She laughed, a triumphant little sound that made my teeth ache. She saw every interaction as a negotiation to be won, every person a resource to be leveraged. And I was next on her list. She took a sip of her wine, set the glass down with a delicate clink, and turned her bright, expectant eyes directly on me. Here it comes, I thought. The storm is here. So she began, her voice syrupy sweet. We've finally locked in all the major vendors. The venue, the DJ, the photographer, all the big-ticket items are done. She paused for dramatic effect, letting everyone at the table lean in. All that's left is the cake. My wife squeezed my hand under the table. It was a small, silent gesture that said, "I'm here. Brace for impact." Allison smiled a wide, predatory grin that didn't reach her eyes. "And obviously, Jackson, you're going to be making it for us. It's going to be the absolute centerpiece of the reception." It wasn't a question. It was a proclamation. She hadn't asked me. She had informed me of my new unpaid job. The way she said it was so casual, so certain, as if she were telling me the sky was blue. The chatter at the table died down. All eyes were on me. I could feel the weight of their expectation orchestrated perfectly by Allison. She had done this in public in front of the whole family to make it impossible for me to say no without looking like a monster. I took a slow breath, trying to keep my voice even. "Wow, Allison, that's a huge honor that you'd even consider me." I started trying the gentle diplomatic route first, But a wedding cake is a massive undertaking, especially for the number of guests you're having. She just waved her hand, that same dismissive gesture I'd seen 100 times. Oh, don't be so modest. Your cakes are better than anything we could buy. We were looking at bakeries and they wanted like $2,000 for something decent. It's a total scam. We'd be so much happier with something you made. I appreciate that I said, my voice getting a little tighter. But it's not just about modesty. It's about logistics and cost. Her smile faltered for the first time. Cost what cost? It's just some flour and sugar, right? You already have all the fancy mixers and pans. And there it was. The fundamental insulting misunderstanding of my entire craft. 5 years of late nights of poring over technical manuals of failed experiments and expensive ingredients of perfecting buttercream and mastering the delicate art of sugar flours, all of it reduced to some flour and sugar. I decided to try logic. Maybe if I laid it all out for her, she would understand. "Allison," I said, leaning forward slightly, "it's a little more complicated than that. A 3-tier cake, which is what you'd need, requires internal supports, dowels, and cake boards. The ingredients alone for something that size would be significant. We're talking pounds of high-quality butter, premium chocolate, gallons of heavy cream, real vanilla extract, which costs a fortune. Just the raw materials would probably run $300 to $400 easily." Her eyes widened slightly, but not with understanding. It was with indignation. $400 for a cake. That's insane, Jackson. That's just the ingredients I pressed on, feeling a desperate need to make her see. That doesn't even account for the labor. A wedding cake like that isn't a one-day job. It's a week-long project. There's planning, structural design, baking 6 or 9 different layers, letting them settle, making the fillings, the frostings, crumb coating each tier, the final frosting, stacking it, which is incredibly nerve-wracking, and then all the decorative work. I have a full-time job. We're talking about 40, maybe 50 hours of my personal time, my nights and my weekend. I looked around the table hoping for some support. My father-in-law was staring intently at his mashed potatoes. My mother-in-law had a pained, neutral expression, clearly wanting the conflict to just disappear. Only my wife was looking at me with sympathy. Allison scoffed, a real audible scoff. "Oh, you're being so dramatic. 50 hours. Come on, you love this stuff. It's your hobby. It's not like it's work for you. It's fun." That was the line. That was the moment the last shred of my goodwill towards her evaporated. It wasn't just that she was cheap. It was that she was invalidating the very essence of my passion. She was weaponizing my love for my craft against me, framing it as a reason why I shouldn't be compensated or even appreciated for my effort. My hobby wasn't fun in the way watching a movie is fun. It was fulfilling and challenging, but it was also grueling, precise, and demanding work. The fun was in the achievement in the final product, a product she was now demanding I hand over for nothing. My wife finally spoke up. "Allison, that's not fair," she said, her voice firm. "You can't just demand that he spend an entire week of his life working for free. It's an incredible amount to ask of anyone, family or not." Allison turned on her sister, her eyes flashing. "I'm not demanding, I just assumed he'd want to do it for us. It's my wedding. It's the most important day of my life. I thought he would be happy to contribute to give us a gift. I mean, what were you guys planning on getting us from our registry, a toaster? This is so much more personal and meaningful." The manipulation was breathtaking. She was reframing her demand as an opportunity for me to give her a more meaningful gift, a gift worth $2,000 instead of the $100 appliance we might have otherwise bought. She was trying to make me feel cheap for even discussing the cost of my own labor and materials. "A gift is something that's offered freely, Allison," I said, my voice now cold. "It's not something that's assigned to you. You didn't ask me if I would be willing to make your cake. You told me I was making it." "This is ridiculous," she huffed, pushing her chair back slightly. She looked at her fiancé for support, and he just gave a weak, helpless shrug. He knew better than to get in the middle of this. "I can't believe you're making this such a big deal. I'm family. You made a giant cake for your own father-in-law's birthday, and you didn't charge him a dime." The sheer audacity of that comparison left me speechless for a second. Your dad's birthday cake was a single tear I finally managed to say. It took me an afternoon and maybe $40 in ingredients. You are asking for a piece of edible architecture that has to withstand transportation hours on display and serve over 100 people. The two are not even in the same universe. Fine, she snapped, her voice rising. I see how it is. My own sister's husband wants to nickel and dime me over my wedding cake. Just forget it. We'll go get some ugly sheet cake from a grocery store. I'm sure my guests will love that. My whole wedding will just be ruined because my own family couldn't be bothered to help. Tears started welling up in her eyes. It was a masterful performance. She was the victim now. I was the cruel, unfeeling brother-in-law who was going to ruin her special day over a few dollars and a little of his fun hobby time. The guilt trip was laid on so thick you could feel it suffocating the room. My mother-in-law finally broke her silence. Now, let's all just calm down, she said placatingly. Allison, honey, I'm sure Jackson didn't mean it like that. And Jackson, you know how much this wedding means to her. And just like that, the pressure of the entire family was on me. I was being positioned as the unreasonable one, the one who needed to compromise. I looked at Allison's tear-streaked, triumphant face. She knew she had won. She had backed me into a corner, and the only way out was to give in or be forever cast as the bad guy who ruined his sister-in-law's wedding. A deep, cold resentment began to crystallize in my chest. It was a feeling I had never experienced before. It wasn't just anger. It was a profound sense of being utterly disrespected, exploited, and manipulated. She didn't value me. She didn't value my time. She didn't value my skill. She saw me as a walking, talking, free cake dispensing appliance that she was entitled to. And in that moment, a tiny dark seed of an idea was planted in my mind. She wanted a cake. She had demanded a cake. She had made it clear that the appearance of a spectacular multi-tiered cake was what mattered for her perfect day. She didn't care about the effort, the cost, or the person making it. She just wanted the product. Fine, I thought. I'll give her a product. I'll give her exactly what she deserves. I let out a long, theatrical sigh of defeat. I looked across the table at her, my expression softening into one of resignation. You're right, Allison. I said the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. I'm sorry. I was just thinking about the logistics and I got overwhelmed. Of course I'll make your cake. It's the most important day of your life. It would be my honor. Her tears vanished, instantly replaced by a radiant, victorious smile. Oh my God, really, she squealed, clapping her hands together. I knew you'd come around. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's going to be amazing. I want 3 tiers vanilla with raspberry filling, and it has to have those little sugar flowers all over it. Whatever you want, I said, my voice a hollow echo of its normal self. I'll take care of it. The tension in the room instantly dissolved. Everyone started talking and laughing again, the crisis averted. My wife shot me a look from across the table, a mixture of confusion, concern, and disappointment. I just gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of my head. We'll talk later. The rest of the dinner was a blur. I nodded and smiled in all the right places, but I wasn't really there. I was somewhere else entirely in my workshop sketching. I was designing the most beautiful, most intricate, most visually perfect wedding cake I had ever conceived of. It would be the centerpiece of her reception. It would make all her guests gasp in admiration. It would be everything she ever dreamed of, and it would be a complete fraud. She wanted my labor for free fine. She would get it. Every bit of my skill, my time, and my artistic talent would be on display. But she had disrespected the heart of my craft, the baking itself. And so the heart would be missing. She wanted a showpiece. I was going to give her a showpiece she would never, ever forget. The resentment in my chest was no longer just a feeling. It had become a blueprint. The week leading up to the wedding was a master class in deception. My wife knew something was up, but she trusted me. She saw the look in my eye after that disastrous family dinner and knew I wasn't just going to roll over. She just didn't know the specifics of my creative solution. She saw me buying supplies, massive tubs of buttercream fondant coloring, and assumed I was just stressed. I let her believe it. This was my battle, and the fallout, whatever it was going to be on me. My graphic design studio became a secret factory of malicious compliance. I started with the core structure. 3 heavy-duty corrugated cardboard cylinders cut to precise heights to create that elegant, tiered wedding cake silhouette. The total height was exactly 24 inches, a respectable size for any reception. I reinforced them from the inside with wooden dowels, just like a real cake, making sure the structure was stable and could easily support its own weight, plus the considerable weight of the frosting to come. This wasn't some flimsy arts and crafts project, this was architecture. Next came the most important part of the illusion, the frosting. I used 12 pounds of high-quality vanilla-scented pure white buttercream. To be clear, the frosting alone cost nearly a third of what the ingredients for an actual cake would have. This wasn't about saving money. This was about making a point. I spent hours applying it using my offset spatulas and bench scrapers to get those perfectly smooth, flawless sides that are the hallmark of a professional cake. To any observer, this was a real delicious, expensive cake. I then spent an entire evening crafting delicate little sugar flowers, just as she'd demanded. I piped intricate scrollwork along the base of each tier. My hands, usually accustomed to a mouse and a drawing tablet, were steady and precise. I was pouring all of my artistic skill into this monument to her entitlement. Every perfect petal, every elegant swirl was a silent testament to the value of the labor she had so casually dismissed. The final crucial piece of the puzzle was the master stroke. I carefully measured and cut out a small 4x4-inch square from the cardboard of the bottom tier, right where a couple would traditionally make the first cut. Into this cavity, I fitted a perfectly sized piece of actual freshly baked vanilla cake with raspberry filling. I frosted over it seamlessly, making the patch completely invisible. The trap was set. The knife would go in, it would meet the soft resistance of real cake, and for one beautiful fleeting second the illusion would be complete. And then, it wouldn't be. On the wedding day, I loaded the magnificent fraud into my car. It was heavy, solid. I felt a strange sense of pride as I carried it into the rented event hall. The wedding planner's eyes went wide. "Oh my gosh, that's stunning," she said, rushing over. "Where should we put it?" We placed it on a specially decorated table in the center of the room, where it immediately became the focal point. Guests arriving for the reception would walk in, see the cake, and you could hear the little gasps of admiration. I saw Allison from across the room beaming. She caught my eye and gave me a huge theatrical thumbs up. I just gave a polite, tight-lipped smile and a nod. The reception was a wedding reception. Toasts were made. Bad dancing was had, and all the while the cake stood there like a ticking time bomb. I sat with my wife, who kept whispering, "It looks incredible, honey. I'm sorry she put you through all this." I just squeezed her hand and said, "It's almost over." Then the moment arrived. The DJ's voice boomed through the speakers. "All right, everyone, let's get the lovely bride and groom over here for the cutting of the cake." A cheer went up from the crowd. Allison, who was now 28 years old and radiating bridal bliss, glided towards the cake with her new husband. They looked so happy. For a split second, I felt a pang of something, not guilt, but maybe pity. It passed quickly. This was a wound of her own making. They were handed a ceremonial silver knife. The photographer knelt down, ready to capture the moment. Phones were raised all around the room. Allison placed her hand over her husband's on the knife, and they smiled for the cameras. She guided the blade to the exact spot I had prepared. The knife sank in. It slid through the buttercream and into the small wedge of real cake with a soft, satisfying give. Perfect. Allison's smile was a mile wide. She and her husband pushed down together to slice through the tier. And then, thud. It wasn't a loud noise, but in the expectant hush of the room, it sounded like a gavel. The knife stopped dead. It hadn't just hit a dowel, it had hit a wall. A confused look flickered across Allison's face. She pushed harder. The knife didn't move. It was wedged against solid cardboard. Her husband gave it a try, grunting a little. Nothing. The silver knife started to bend slightly under the pressure. The photographer lowered his camera, confused. A few guests started murmuring. Allison's perfect smile began to curdle. She repositioned the knife an inch over and tried again. Scrape. The metallic sound of a knife tip dragging across cardboard echoed faintly. Her face, which had been a mask of bridal joy, was now contorting into a storm of confusion and dawning horror. She jabbed at the cake, her movements becoming frantic. With each jab, a bit of frosting would flake away, revealing the dull brown of the corrugated cardboard beneath. A wave of whispers washed over the room. "What's wrong with the cake? Is it frozen?" And then in her panic, Allison tore at the frosting with her fingers. A huge chunk of buttercream came away in her hand, revealing the unmistakable industrial texture of a cardboard box. The room fell into a stunned collective silence. And then Allison let out a sound. It was a strangled gasp that turned into a wail of pure, unadulterated rage and humiliation. In front of all her friends, all her family on the most important day of her life, she had been exposed. Her perfect showpiece cake was a decorated box. Chaos erupted. Her new husband was trying to calm her down. Her mother was rushing towards her, and Allison was just screaming, pointing a buttercream-covered finger directly at me. "You!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You did this! You ruined my wedding!" The party was effectively over. Guests were standing around awkwardly, not knowing where to look. Allison, completely hysterical, stormed towards our table. My wife stood up, ready to defend me, but I put a hand on her arm and stood up myself. "How could you?" Allison screamed, tears streaming down her face, leaving streaks in her expensive makeup. "You did this to ruin my day. You're a horrible, jealous person." I waited until she paused to take a breath. And then, in a perfectly calm, level voice that cut through her hysteria, I responded, "Allison, I did exactly what you insisted upon." She stared at me dumbfounded. "What are you talking about?" I asked for a wedding cake. "No," I said, my voice still quiet, forcing everyone around us to lean in to hear. "For 3 months you didn't ask. You demanded. You demanded a 3-tier cake. You dismissed the cost of my materials. You dismissed the value of my time and my skill. You refused to listen when I tried to explain what a massive undertaking it was. You wanted a showpiece for your perfect day. You wanted something that looked a certain way. You got it. It was a gift, freely given, just like you wanted. There was no contract. There was no payment. And therefore, there was no specification that the gift had to be edible." A new wave of shock rippled through the onlookers. Allison's mother-in-law was staring at me with her mouth hanging open. Allison was sputtering. But, it's a cake. A cake is supposed to be food." "Is it?" I countered. "You treated it like a prop. You treated me like a prop. An appliance to be used for your convenience. You didn't care about the craft, you just cared about the photo op. So I gave you the best photo op I could. It looked perfect, didn't it? Everyone here thought it was a masterpiece." My wife, Allison's older sister, finally stepped forward. She looked at her weeping, furious sibling, and then she looked at me. She took my hand. "He's right, Allison," she said, her voice full of a sad finality. "I heard you. We all heard you for months. You bullied him into this. You didn't want his talent, you wanted his free labor. He works hard at his craft, and you treated it and him like it was nothing. This is what happens when you devalue people." That was it, the final nail. To be publicly called out by her own sister was more than Allison could take. Her rage collapsed into gut-wrenching sobs. The relationship was over. I knew it, she knew it, everyone knew it. It had been irrevocably shattered the moment that knife hit cardboard. We left shortly after that. The family was shattered into factions, and I'm sure the arguments went late into the night. But as my wife and I drove home in silence, a profound sense of peace washed over me. I wasn't happy about destroying a relationship, but I felt vindicated. I had been pushed and manipulated and emotionally blackmailed. I had stood my ground in the only way I could. I had used my own skill to craft a lesson that nobody in that room would ever forget. The relationship with my sister-in-law is gone forever. but so is the expectation that my time, my passion, and my labor are free for the taking. I taught her and everyone else that my work has value, and that was a victory that I have to admit tasted pretty sweet.